wrong?
They're not going to be wrong. It is going to work. And the president has a brilliant team of advisors who have been studying these issues for decades. We are focused on restoring the golden age of America and making America a manufacturing superpower. And again, Peter, I would point you to the investments that have already trickled into this country. And the president hasn't even made his tariff announcement yet tomorrow. There have been billions of dollars in private investments from around the world pouring into American communities. What does that look like for those watching at home, for the people you mentioned worried about their own economic circumstances? It means more jobs in your communities, which means more money, more investments, more money in your pocket. That's what the president is committed to. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the president's commitment to tax cuts, which we are counting on Congress to do, especially on Social Security.
And one more.
Sure.
Are the special elections today a referendum on the president?
I think first of all, as you know, I'm a government employee now, so I'm not very much allowed to comment on elections that are taking place. That's something to get used to, having just been on the campaign trail for quite some time. But the president is the leader of the America First movement and the MAGA movement. And that was made very clear on November the 5th when he received nearly 80 million votes. I could also say that it is the constitutional right of every law-abiding American in these places where these elections are being held to vote, and every American should exercise their constitutional rights. Sure.
Thanks, Karoline. A few questions about this deportation case. First, I wanted to clarify something that you said to Jeff a few minutes ago. You said you'd seen evidence that this man was a convicted gang member. In what court was he convicted, and for what?
This individual was an MS-13 ringleader. This individual was also engaged in human trafficking. And I'm glad you brought up this point again, because I would like to point out that if you just saw the headline from the insane, failing Atlantic magazine this morning, you would think this individual was Father of the Year, living in Maryland, living a peaceful life, when that couldn't be further from the truth. They didn't even mention in the title of that article, or even in the first paragraph, that this individual is an illegal criminal who broke our nation's immigration laws. He is a leader in the brutal MS-13 gang, and he is involved in human trafficking, and now MS-13 is a designated foreign terrorist organization. Foreign terrorists have no legal protections in the United States of America, and this administration is going to continue to deport foreign terrorists and illegal criminals from our nation's interior.
But a judge ordered that he should remain in this country. So are you saying that it is okay to ignore a judge's ruling if you don't like it?
Who does that judge work for?
He's an immigration
It was an
judge.
immigration judge who works for the Department of Justice at the direction of the Attorney General of the United States, whose name is Pam Bondi, who has committed to eradicating MS-13 from our nation's interior. And let me tell you why we've made this commitment. MS-13, may I remind each and every one of you, is a brutal and vicious gang. They raped and strangled a 20-year-old autistic woman to death in Maryland. They hacked 4 people to death with machetes in a park on Long Island. They have kidnapped, sexually tortured, and shot a teenage girl in Texas after she insulted them, allegedly. Killed and mutilated a 17-year-old girl in Virginia, stabbing him 16 times and cutting off his hands. They beheaded and cut out the heart of a man in Washington, D.C. They raped and murdered a 13-year-old girl in California. They sex trafficked a slew of young girls, including one who was just 12 years old. Raped an 11-year-old girl in Brooklyn while her brother was in the room. Sex trafficked a 13-year-old in Maryland and Virginia, miles away from this White House, even beating her 26 times on her backside with a baseball bat. Pressured homeless New Yorkers to undergo unnecessary surgeries such as spinal fusion in order to bolster their fraudulent lawsuits. These are vicious criminals. This is a vicious gang. And I wish that the media would spend just a second of the same time you have spent trying to litigate each and every individual of this gang who has been deported from our country as the innocent Americans whose lives have been lost at the hands of these brutal criminals. We maintain our position, and very strongly so. Jennifer.
One more on the tariffs. Can you say what the latest thinking is on the start date? I know you were just in the Oval. Are they all going to take effect this week on the reciprocal tariffs? And whenever they start, is that enough time for companies and everyone involved to adjust to that start date?
My understanding is that the tariff announcement will come tomorrow. They will be effective immediately. And the president has been teasing this for quite some time, as you know. He's talked a lot about April 2nd as Liberation Day in America. It would be taking place today if not for April Fool's Day. But tomorrow will be the day, and he's been talking about it for a while. And as a result, you've seen these companies make commitments commitments to investing right here in the United States. Jasmine.
Thank you so much. I wonder, back on tariffs, what, if any, market indicators is the White House looking for to see if this tariffs plan is successful down the line?
Well, look, the president has been asked and answered this question about the stock market and whether he's watching it. And I've said, and he has said, the market is a snapshot in time. Yesterday, Dow futures were up. And there's been a lot of talk about the market, and it was up yesterday. So, look, the president wants to ensure that all Americans make out well, particularly Main Street. That's the focus of these tariffs. But as I've said repeatedly, just like they were in his first term, Wall Street will be just fine. Shelby.
Thanks. A bipartisan pair of senators sent a letter to the president today arguing that the recent strikes in Yemen are emboldening the Houthis and saying that Congress has not authorized war against them. Is the administration planning to consult with Congress at some point or going forward regarding the strikes, and any response on the letter?
Well, I would absolutely reject Congress's claims. Who made those claims in Congress?
Senator Jeff Merkley and Rand Paul.
Okay, well, I would absolutely reject those claims. These Houthi strikes have been incredibly successful. Last time I was at this podium, there were more than 100 successful strikes. There have now been over 200 successful strikes against the Houthis. Iran is incredibly weakened as a result of these attacks, and we have seen they've taken out Houthi leaders. They've taken out critical members who were launching strikes on naval ships and on commercial vessels, and this operation will not stop until the freedom of navigation in this region is restored, which is a critical principle. And this president stands behind our Defense Department, who's doing a tremendous job.
And are they going to, is the White House going to confer with Congress going forward on this?
I would have to ask our team here at the White House, but the president is well within his authority, as is the Secretary of Defense. Again, these are defensive strikes. The Houthis have been launching attacks on U.S. naval vessels and commercial ships for quite some time. Go ahead.
Caroline,
Yeah.
the pause on the Canadian and Mexican tariffs, the fentanyl tariffs, that's set to expire tomorrow. Is the president considering extending that pause?
Look, I will let the president speak on the specifics of the tariffs tomorrow. But as for fentanyl, we have seen this has certainly caused a national security crisis here in the United States. Fentanyl continues to be the #1 killer of young people in this country, and the president is very much focused on that. Deanna.
Thank you, Caroline. The president recently signed an executive order on making D.C. safe and beautiful. On the campaign trail, he talked about making New York great again. Does he have any plans on establishing a similar task force? Has he been pressuring Governor Hochul in any way in his conversations about New York and lowering crime?
Well, he has been in correspondence with Governor Hochul quite a bit on the issue of crime, also on the issue of congestion pricing, and so many other issues that are facing New Yorkers. And he wants New York to clean up their streets just as he does here in Washington, D.C. He also speaks to Mayor Adams as well. So he's engaged with state and local leaders across the entire country to ensure they're doing their part to help American citizens in each and every state, regardless of if it's a red state or a blue state.
A question on Russia. Yesterday, the Russian government said that their new goal is 160,000 conscripts for the war. Has the president seen that number, and does he have any response given his recent conversations on peace talks?
Well, I can tell you what the president said last night, and that is he is frustrated with leaders on both sides of this war. He wants this war to end. There are men that are dying on both sides, and it's been going on for far too long. Our team continues to be engaged with the Russians as we are with the Ukrainians, and the president continues to be very, very much engaged on this topic every single day.
Caroline.
Sure.
Caroline,
Sure.
The president said over the weekend that he couldn't care less if prices went up on foreign cars because people buy more American cars. There's been consensus from a lot of economists that these tariffs could raise prices on other goods as well. Is the president comfortable with Americans on Main Street paying more because of these tariffs?
The president is doing everything he can, and this entire administration is doing everything we can to bring down the cost of living in this country. An inflation mess that was fueled by the previous administration's reckless spending, overburdensome regulations that this administration is focused on slashing every single day. I just read you a statistic just from the Environmental Protective Agency alone. We're saving taxpayers money that's ultimately going to drive down inflation, and we're unleashing the might of our energy industry, which will bring down prices as well. To the heart of your question, because this is very important to the American people, you should trust what this president did for you in his first term. He effectively utilized tariffs while driving down inflation. It was a record low 1.4% when he left office. and he's focused on getting back to that. It's unfortunate the previous administration left us in this mess. Sure.
Representative Anna Paulina Luna left the Freedom Caucus over their lack of support for her bill that would allow new parents to proxy vote around 12 weeks around the birth of their baby. Does the president support that bill?
I'm not sure. I haven't actually talked to the president about that bill, but I certainly can and can get a take on if he supports it or not.
Thank you. And one more. The D.C. Circuit ruled last week that the president can fire holdover Biden appointees of independent agencies. Will this ruling empower President Trump to dismiss more federal employees?
Well, the president has given the responsibility to his cabinet secretaries to hire and fire at their respective agencies, and they reserve that right. You saw the Secretary of Health and Human Services announced more layoffs today. This is all part of the administration's effort for a mass reduction in force in the federal bureaucracy here in Washington, D.C. to save American taxpayers money. As for agencies within the president's executive authority, the president retains that right. And we've seen there have been bureaucrats at some of these agencies that have been trying to act independent. They need to remember who they work for. It's the executive of the executive branch. You look at the United States Institute of Peace, for example. There was a little bit of a standoff with bureaucrats over there who didn't want to realize who they work for, and that is Donald Trump. And President Trump is focused on streamlining these agencies to save American taxpayers money, and he has every right to do that.
Karoline.
Sure. Go ahead.
Thanks, Karoline.
Yeah.
In Gaza, the bodies of 15 rescuers have been found in their sort of ambulances where they were apparently killed by Israeli forces. Just wondering if the White House is going to be calling on Israel to investigate that and to try and avoid similar casualties involving rescue workers in future.
Well, as for the specific situation you just mentioned, I'll talk to the president about it and our national security team. What I can tell you is what I've spoken with the president on. He very much remains committed to backing Israel, and it was only because of this president and his team's leadership that we had a temporary ceasefire in Gaza, that we were able to bring many hostages home. And the president made it very clear to Hamas, you get the hostages out, all of them, or there will be hell to pay. And Hamas is certainly witnessing what it feels like for all hell to be paid, and the president supports Israel's right to defend itself.
Any progress at all on a ceasefire at the moment, as far as the president's concerned?
The president and his team continue to be engaged on this every single day. Sure. Go ahead, Tara.
So I'm just wondering, related to that, if you have an approximate date for the president's first foreign trip. I think there was a little confusion yesterday about what month he was talking about. And then will he need a ceasefire to be in place or closer, either in Gaza or in Ukraine, before that trip takes place?
Mm-hmm. The president will be heading to Saudi Arabia in May. As for specific dates and details, we will be reading those out to you as soon as we possibly can. I know our teams are working on the details of that trip. And then again, as for a ceasefire, the president's made it clear that's what he wants to see in Russia and Ukraine, and his team continues to be engaged on it every day.
And
Kelly.
Signal, you said case closed yesterday. Do you, as that case was closed, do you have anything that you can share about what was learned, how this can be avoided in the future, any sort of findings from that investigation?
The case is closed, and the president continues to have confidence in his national security advisor. Yes, Kelly. Kelly.
Thanks, Karoline. So the
Sorry,
president
Ed.
has said.
Ed, I'll come to you after.
The president has
I'm
said,
glad you're so eager to ask a question.
It's Liberation Day.
Yes, it is.
Caroline, the president has said foreign
Tomorrow.
countries and companies will eat the cost of tariffs. In his speech on Inauguration Day, he said, quote, instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens.
Right.
So then why did he have to tell the domestic automakers not to raise prices?
Well, that was a private conversation that was had. I'm not sure if that comment said in his Inauguration Day speech. He's absolutely correct. A tariff will be a tax on these foreign nations, these foreign companies, and if they want to be absolved of that tariff, then they can come here to the United States of America to do business, bring their jobs here.
Yes.
Edward, go ahead.
Thank you. So Canadians have been negotiating with the Commerce Secretary over the trade, the tariffs. How many companies are mutually talking with the U.S. or countries are mutually talking with the U.S. to lower tariffs?
I don't have a specific number, but I can tell you there have been quite a few countries that have called the president and have called his team in discussion about these tariffs. But again, there's one country the president cares most about, and it's the United States of America, and doing what's best for the people who elected him to this office to restore their jobs, their wealth, and their prosperity. I'm looking at the clock. I have a hard out today. I have a hard out today because I'm actually heading over to the State Department with the First Lady of the United States. She will be delivering remarks at 1 o'clock this afternoon at the 19th International Women of Courage Award ceremony with our great Secretary of State Marco Rubio that starts at 1. This is the 5th year Mrs. Trump is participating and standing with brave women leaders who embody American values abroad. And the First Lady in her remarks today will highlight the profound connection between the love and courage that will be shown by this year's honorees. I encourage everybody to tune in at 1 o'clock, and then we'll see you all tomorrow for Liberation. Good to see you all. Since Inauguration Day, President Trump has secured trillions of dollars in private and foreign investments. Every single day, more money is pouring into our country, which will create more jobs for hardworking Americans. Today, Schneider Electric pledged to invest more than $700 million in the United States to boost American energy infrastructure and AI. On Monday, Hyundai announced a $20 billion investment in the United States, including $5.8 billion for a new steel plant in Louisiana, which will create nearly 1,500 high-paying jobs. President Trump is truly turning America back into a manufacturing superpower. Yesterday, President Trump marked National Medal of Honor Day by meeting with 21 of our nation's bravest heroes and incredible patriots who have been awarded the highest military honor. The president also signed a historic executive order to protect the integrity of American elections by strengthening voter citizenship verification and banning foreign nationals from interfering in U.S. elections. These are the common sense solutions that only Democrats could oppose. But voters deserve elections they can trust, and critical confidence is being restored thanks to President Trump's leadership. Later this afternoon in the East Room, President Trump will mark Women's History Month by honoring the exceptional women around our country, including the highly talented women in his administration and his cabinet. And on an additional scheduling update, the president will hold a press conference in the Oval Office today at 4 o'clock p.m. to announce tariffs on the auto industry, and I will leave that to him to make that announcement later. Unfortunately, all of this good is happening for our country. This administration is working hard on behalf of the American public every day, but the mainstream media continues to be focused on a sensationalized story from the failing Atlantic magazine that is falling apart by the hour. Here are the facts. The National Security Advisor has taken responsibility for this matter, and the National Security Council immediately said, alongside the White House counsel's office, that they are looking into how a reporter's number was inadvertently added to this messaging thread. We have said all along that no classified material was sent on this messaging thread. There were no locations, no sources, or methods revealed, and there were certainly no war plans discussed. The Atlantic has even admitted this themselves. Their release of these internal messages validates the truth, which we have been saying all along. If this story proves anything, it proves that Democrats and their propagandists in the mainstream media know how to fabricate, orchestrate, and disseminate a misinformation campaign quite well. And there's arguably no one in the media who loves manufacturing and pushing hoaxes more than Jeffrey Goldberg. Goldberg is an anti-Trump hater. He is a registered Democrat. Goldberg's wife is also a registered Democrat and a big Democrat donor who used to work under who? Hillary Clinton. This is the same Jeffrey Goldberg who infamously lied about weapons of mass destruction to get us into the Iraq War, which cost trillions of dollars and thousands of American soldiers. And how else has Goldberg discredited himself? By absurdly claiming that President Trump was Vladimir Putin during the 2016 campaign, by peddling the Russia hoax that tried to hijack President Trump's first term, by inventing the suckers and losers hoax to help Joe Biden in the 2020 election, by peddling a hoax about President Trump involving Gold Star families to help Kamala Harris in the 2024 election, which our campaign at the time vigorously denied. Jeffrey Goldberg didn't care. There's more, but we don't have all day, and we can now add this signal hoax to this very long list. The real story here is the overwhelming success of President Trump's decisive military action against Houthi terrorists. On March 15th, President Trump ordered a series of military operations against the terrorist Houthis to defend U.S. shipping assets in the Red Sea, restore freedom of navigation for international shipping, and defend the United States from enemy threats. United States forces successfully struck dozens of targets across Houthi-controlled territory. And as a result of these actions, several Houthi leaders were killed, including the Houthi drone chief, his deputy, and several of their drone experts and other key leaders. We also destroyed command and controlled facilities, weapons manufacturing facilities, and advanced weapons storage locations. And it's important to remember why this powerful action took place in the first place. Because of Joe Biden's incompetence and pathetic weakness on the world stage for years, the Houthi terrorists grew emboldened. Immediately after taking office in 2021, Joe Biden removed the Iran-backed Houthis from the foreign terrorist organization and specifically designated global terrorist list. Did anybody in this room ask the Biden administration at the time why they made such a stupid mistake? This reckless action undid the designation put in place by President Trump during his first term, and what followed was predictable and devastating. The Houthis targeted U.S. military ships and aircraft, hit commercial ships, including U.S.-flagged vessels, threatened our personnel overseas, and attacked our allies in the region. This resulted in more than a year of U.S.-flagged commercial ships being prevented from safely sailing through the Suez Canal, the Red Sea, and the Gulf of Aden. This had a massive negative impact on global trade of the economic security of the United States. Joe Biden was the commander-in-chief, and he sat on his hands while the United States of America was bullied and embarrassed by terrorists. President Trump and his team are putting a stop to these threats and restoring American strength around the world. The Trump peace through strength approach means no terrorist force will stop American commercial and naval vessels from freely sailing the waterways of the world. But unfortunately, this is not what the Democrats and the media want to talk about. They are focused on a coordinated campaign to try and sow chaos in this White House. And this has been the most successful first 2 months of any administration ever, which is exactly why they are doing this. We are not going to bend in the face of this insincere outrage. And here's just one example of how bad faith the Democrats' criticisms are. Democrat Senator Mark Warner is hysterical over the use of Signal, which is an approved decrypted app, in the killing of Houthi terrorists. But Senator Warner himself used Signal to work with a lobbyist for a Russian oligarch to connect the disgraced Steele dossier author who started the Russia hoax, which Jeffrey Goldberg later reported on. How ironic. We're not going to lose focus of the bottom line, which is that Joe Biden's weakness enabled and emboldened Houthi terrorists, and President Trump's strength and resolve eliminated those terrorists. Here in our new media seat today, we have Lindsay Keith. She is the managing editor for Merit TV and serves as their White House correspondent. Merit TV launched 1 year ago and creates and distributes content across diverse platforms. We're glad to have you with us, Lindsay. Please kick us off.
I appreciate it and this opportunity for Merit TV. 2 questions, if I may. One on Signal, one on the economy.
Sure.
On Signal, how comfortable is the president with what was shared so far now that the chain has been released?
The president's view on all of this remains the same today as it did yesterday. And I think it speaks volumes about the leadership of this president that he went directly to all of you, members of the press corps. He was asked, do you want someone else to go out and do a briefing? And he said, no, I will tackle this story. I will discuss it. The people need to hear from me about this situation. And so his thoughts on this remained the same today. He has placed great trust in his national security team. And as for the usage of Signal, as the president said yesterday, as the CIA director has testified under oath, this is an approved app. It's an encrypted app. The Department of Defense, the Department of State, the CIA has it loaded onto government phones because it is the most secure and efficient way to communicate. As for, again, the original situation in this messaging thread, the National Security Council, the White House counsel's office continues to look in to how this mistake, which the National Security Advisor has owned, occurred, and the president has ensured they are doing that.
On the economy, consumer confidence hit a 4-year low this month. Can you help explain to the American people how tariffs will help them in the long run?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm grateful for the question. The American public will hear later this afternoon from the president directly on the topic of tariffs. And as you all know, April 2nd day, President Trump has proudly dubbed it Liberation Day for our country. What he means by that is it will be a day where the United States of America will no longer be ripped off by nations around this world. It will be a day where Americans finally see free and fair trade practices restored. We are no longer going to allow our allies, our competitors, and our adversaries to take advantage of American workers. And if you think about your hometown in the state that you grew up, Main Street looks a lot different today than it did many years ago. And President Trump wants to restore America as a manufacturing superpower around the globe. He wants products to be made right here in our great country with great hardworking American hands that will ultimately result in higher wages and more money in the pockets of the American people. And he's also, in addition to tariffs, also determined to pass tax cuts later this year, as he did successfully in his first term, to put even more money back into the pockets of hardworking Americans. Peter.
Caroline, if I can ask you very quickly about the information we've seen, just to set the predicate to all this. Has the president been briefed and physically seen he's seen all the details of the chat as printed by the Atlantic?
I just spoke to the president about it, yes.
Then let me ask you, if I can, very quickly. In the chat, Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, details F-18s, Tomahawks, so some of the weapons that were used. He details the timing involved for this, all of which occurred 31 minutes before, as he says, F-18s would launch. The DoD manual details classified information as significant military plans, saying that is secret, that's classified. So what about, there are no methods, there are no sources, but that's not what determines what's classified. So what is it about what Pete Hegseth wrote that makes you say this is not classified?
Well, it's not just me saying that, Peter. It's the Secretary of Defense himself who is saying this as well. And he put out a very strong statement earlier today listing all of the things that were not included in that message that he sent to the group. And again, this message, there was no classified information transmitted. There were no war plans discussed. Why did the Atlantic downgrade their allegation about war plans to attack plans? They're now playing word games because they know this was sensationalist spin from a reporter who is well known for doing this. We have said all along no war plans were discussed, no classified material was sent. You have the Secretary of Defense saying that. You have the Director of the CIA, the Director of National Intelligence, the FBI Director, all testifying to that under oath, and they should be trusted with that.
To be clear, Americans can make the decision for themselves, but whether
Sure.
you said it's not war plans. Would you characterize these as military plans, military operation plans?
I would characterize this messaging thread as a policy discussion, a sensitive policy discussion, surely, amongst high-level cabinet officials and senior staff. And I'm so glad, Peter, that you said the American public can decide for themselves, because I think the American public should decide for themselves based on the outcome of this operation. And what happened in this operation? Terrorists that were allowed to run wild by the Biden administration were killed because of the direction and the determination of this president and his team. And this message also shows, this messaging thread also proved that President Trump has an incredibly dynamic team who is working incredibly hard, flying all over the world to secure world peace and to fix up the foreign policy crises that the previous administration left for this team to inherit.
So to be clear, we all in this room and around the country would agree that we're glad no American service members were harmed, and we're glad that the mission was a success. We'll stipulate that. But the president said that Pete Hegseth said none of this was classified. So given the president has seen it now, and given the president understands that significant military plans are deemed classified as secret, how does the president view none of this, which details times and weapons and more, as being not classified?
I've already been asked and answered this question. The president's thoughts on this remain the same today as they were yesterday,
On what basis,
as well as the Secretary of Defense. This question has been asked and answered. There was no classified material discussed.